Good evening, my friends. You were not born to blend in. You were born to stand out. But the difference between being heard and being respected is not just in what you say. It's in how you say it. Respect is not demanded. It is attracted. And one of the greatest magnets of respect is the way a person speaks. Have you ever listened to someone and felt your soul sit up straight? Something about their words made you pause, lean in, and listen. They didn't shout. They didn't beg. They didn't entertain. They just spoke, and people listened. Today, I want to teach you how to speak like that. Not just to be heard, but to be honored. Not just to make noise, but to move people. Clarity creates credibility. This is not just a phrase, it's a life-altering principle. When your words are clear, your presence becomes powerful. In a world where confusion is everywhere, on social media, in relationships, in business, in leadership, clarity is like oxygen. The moment you open your mouth with precision, people stop, they turn, and they begin to listen. Not because you're louder, but because you're clear. Think about it. Have you ever sat in a meeting where someone was talking, and by the end, nobody could repeat what they said? They used fancy phrases, threw around technical jargon, maybe even sounded educated, but nobody understood a thing. Now compare that with someone who speaks simply directly and leaves no room for guessing. They walk into the room, they speak, and everyone nods. Not because they agree, but because they understand. And that understanding builds trust. You see, trust is not built through volume. It's built through value. And clarity is value in verbal form. When you speak clearly, people begin to believe you know what you're talking about. And belief, my friend, is the foundation of respect. Imagine going to a doctor and asking about your symptoms. The doctor frowns, scratches their head, speaks in riddles, and gives you 5 different answers that contradict each other. You walk out feeling more confused than when you went in. Would you trust that doctor? Would you return to that clinic? Of course not. But what if the doctor looked you in the eye and said, "Here's what's happening in your body. This is what caused it. And here's exactly how we're going to treat it." You'd walk out not just feeling informed. You'd feel safe. Clarity makes people feel safe. In the same way, every time you open your mouth, whether you're a teacher, a parent, a student, a manager, or a friend, you're either giving clarity or confusion. And people lean in toward clarity. They back away from confusion. I once met a young entrepreneur who had a powerful product idea. She pitched it to several investors. She was passionate, enthusiastic, full of energy, but no one invested. When I sat with her and listened, I understood why. Her words were all over the place. She was trying to say everything, and in doing so, she said nothing. I told her, people don't buy your excitement, they buy your clarity. Tell them what problem you solve. Tell them how it works. Tell them why it matters. The next time she pitched, she got funding. Not because she changed her product, she changed her words. Clarity is not about speaking more. It's about saying less with more impact. A leader doesn't speak to impress, they speak to express. They don't dump information, they deliver insight. And insight is born from clarity. Even in your personal relationships, clarity is the glue that holds things together. How many arguments happen because people are unclear about their expectations? How many friendships have broken over misunderstandings? It's not that people meant harm. It's that they weren't clear. They assumed, they hinted, they implied, but they didn't express. Clarity would have saved them. Clarity is kindness. When you're clear with your words, you give people a map instead of a maze. And people love those who make their path simpler, not harder. Every time you communicate, you have 2 choices. Light the way or fog it up. Clarity lights the way. And don't think clarity is about dumbing things down. No. It's about elevating people's understanding. When someone speaks clearly, it shows mastery. It shows they've done the thinking for you. They've processed the complexity and now deliver simplicity. And that right there is leadership. If you want to make people respect you, stop trying to sound bigger. Start trying to be clearer. Respect doesn't follow noise, it follows direction. When you speak, people should say, no, I know what to do. That's the sign you've led them. That's the sign your words carried weight. Every great speaker, every respected leader, every successful mentor has learned this truth. Clarity is not a skill, it's a discipline. It means stripping away what's unnecessary. It means editing your thoughts before you share them. It means slowing down enough to think before you talk. It means not trying to be clever, but choosing to be clear. Because clever may get you applause, but clarity gets you results. So the next time you step into a room, remember, your clarity is your credibility. Your ability to say what needs to be said in the way it needs to be heard will determine whether people walk away thinking they were interesting, or whether they walk away saying, I'll follow them. The world is not looking for another echo. It's looking for a voice that brings direction, a voice that simplifies complexity, a voice that cuts through the noise and says, this is the way forward. And that voice, my friend, could be yours. All it takes is clarity. Clarity creates credibility. Let that sink in for a moment. Because in every conversation, every meeting, every speech, and every relationship, you are either building credibility or losing it. And it all depends on how clearly you communicate. Most people think that the louder they talk, the more they'll be respected. Some think that using big words or complicated language will make them sound smart. But have you noticed that the people we respect the most often speak the simplest? They don't hide behind fluff. They don't dance around their message. They walk straight into the point with confidence, and when they speak, you feel like they've handed you a key to unlock something inside your mind. Clarity is not about being purposeful. It's about being purposeful. It's about knowing what you're saying and why you're saying it. When your words are clear, people feel safe around you. They know they can trust you. They know where you stand. They don't have to second guess your intentions. Think of a traffic signal. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It just flashes red, yellow, or green. Simple, clear, direct, and everyone follows it. Not because it's the biggest thing on the street, but because it communicates without confusion. Now imagine if the traffic lights were replaced with complex signs, flashing paragraphs, or artistic metaphors. Chaos, confusion, collisions. And the same happens in life when people don't communicate clearly. When leaders are vague, teams fall apart. When parents are unclear, children get lost. When partners assume instead of express, love turns into tension. I once watched a man in a boardroom try to pitch a groundbreaking idea. He had charts. He had numbers. He had a brilliant concept. But no one in that room nodded. No one leaned in. You could see the confusion on their faces. Why? Because his words were all over the place. Too many slides, too many angles, too many explanations. And when he left, someone whispered, I still don't get what he was saying. That one line destroyed all the effort he had put in. Not because the idea was weak, but because the communication was unclear. A few weeks later, another woman stood in the same room with a similar idea. She said, here's the problem. Here's what we've been doing. Here's why it's not working. And here's my solution. Pause. Silence. Then came the applause. Same room. Different outcome. What changed? Clarity. And with that clarity came instant credibility. People trusted her. They believed in her. They respected her voice. Clarity doesn't just affect how others see you. It affects how you see yourself. When you speak clearly, you think clearly. Your confidence rises. Your posture changes. Your mind becomes focused. And when you're clear, you're powerful. In everyday life, clarity is your hidden superpower. You go to a restaurant and the menu is all over the place. 3 pages of random dishes with fancy names you can't pronounce. You ask the waiter, what do you recommend? And he shrugs. You lose trust. You feel overwhelmed. Now walk into another place. Short menu. Clear options. Confident staff. We do 3 things and we do them well. You feel at ease. You trust the service. Why? Because clarity builds credibility. Even in your friendships. Have you ever had someone cancel plans with vague excuses? You sense something's off, but they won't say it. They're dodging the truth, sugarcoating, avoiding. That moment weakens the bond. But when someone is honest and says, I'm tired today. I need time for myself. It may not be what you wanted to hear, but you respect them more for it. Because they were clear, and respect, my friend, is the currency of leadership. It doesn't matter how skilled you are, how talented you are, or how experienced you are. If people don't understand you, they won't follow you. They might clap for you, but they won't walk with you. Clarity is the bridge between your message and their action. I remember being in a classroom once where the teacher tried to explain a complex concept. Everyone was lost, heads down, blank stares. But then a quiet student in the back raised her hand and said, "Can I explain it a different way?" The teacher nodded. The student stood up and broke it down, using a story about shopping at the market. Suddenly light bulbs went on. Everyone understood. The class clapped. And in that moment, that student gained more credibility than the teacher. Not because she had more knowledge, but because she had more clarity. When you walk into a room, clarity is what makes people turn their heads. When you give instructions, clarity is what makes others act. When you tell your story, clarity is what makes it stick. And when you lead, clarity is what makes people believe you. There's a difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to be understood. Many people are loud, but not clear. Many people are passionate, but not precise. Many people talk, but few truly communicate. If you want to be one of the few, train your mind to simplify before you speak. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to say? If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it deeply. And if you don't understand it deeply, you won't be trusted completely. Credibility is not something you ask for. It's something you earn. And you earn it every time you choose clarity over confusion, simplicity over complexity, and direction over distraction. Clarity is what makes people listen when you talk. Clarity is what makes them say, I don't just hear you, I trust you. Speak with purpose, not to perform. This is one of the greatest secrets of influence, yet most people miss it. Too many are speaking just to be seen, just to sound important, just to impress someone in the room. They put on a show with their voice, but say nothing that moves the soul. The world doesn't need more performers. The world needs purposeful voices. People who speak not for attention, but for intention. Purposeful speech carries a different kind of energy. You can feel it. It doesn't try too hard. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't entertain for applause. It speaks because something within must be said. And when that kind of voice speaks, people don't just listen. They change. Their mindset shifts. Their heart opens. Their thinking expands. Because the words came from a place deeper than performance. They came from purpose. Think about the last time you heard someone speak and it left you thinking about it for hours. Maybe even days. They didn't scream. They didn't put on a show. But their words hit you. It was like they reached into your life without even knowing your story. They weren't speaking to look good. They were speaking to do good. I remember watching a student once in a college debate. He was up against competitors with flashy presentations, expensive suits, rehearsed jokes, and animated voices. He walked up quietly, no slides, no dramatics, and then he spoke. Simple, calm, grounded. But his words were soaked in meaning. He said, I'm not here to win a round. I'm here because the topic we're discussing affects real people. People like my brother. People like your neighbors. And if we can't speak with purpose, then maybe we shouldn't speak at all. By the time he finished, you could feel a shift in the room. He didn't perform. He delivered. And that's why he won. Every day, people are posting, tweeting, recording, and talking nonstop. Everyone has something to say, but not everyone has something worth listening to. Because when you speak to perform, your voice becomes noise. But when you speak with purpose, your voice becomes a signal, a light, a compass. Performance-driven speaking is about ego. It's about being liked. It's about standing out. But purpose-driven speaking is about service. It's about impact. It's about standing up for something that matters. You don't need a microphone or a stage to speak with purpose. Purpose shows up in the way you speak to your child, in the way you confront your friend with truth, in the way you give feedback to your team, in the way you stand up for someone who doesn't have a voice. When your words are rooted in purpose, people can feel it. I've seen a janitor walk into a meeting and say one sentence that changed everything. He wasn't invited to impress. He wasn't there to look important. He spoke up because he saw something that others didn't. And when he spoke, the entire room turned quiet. Not because he was loud, but because he was real. Purpose does that. It breaks through titles. It breaks through performance. It speaks directly to what matters. The truth is, people are tired of fake. They are tired of fluff. They are tired of show. They want real. They want honest. They want meaningful. When you speak with purpose, even if your voice shakes, it still carries power. Because the world doesn't need more polish. It needs more truth. Have you ever seen someone try to impress with big words and complicated language, only to leave the room more confused than inspired? That's performance, and it pushes people away. But when someone speaks from the heart with clarity, with direction, with meaning, people lean in. They lean in because they can tell. This isn't for show. This is for me. Your voice is not a stage prop. It's a tool for transformation. But it only works when it is used with purpose. Don't speak just because you have a mouth. Speak because you have a message. Speak because there's something inside you that needs to be heard, not because you want to be seen. Every conversation you enter, ask yourself, am I here to perform or am I here to impact? When your focus is performance, you become self-conscious. You worry about how you look, how you sound, how you're being judged. But when your focus is purpose, you forget about yourself. You become consumed by the mission. And that's when your words start to matter. You can walk into a boardroom, into a classroom, into a living room, and if your words carry purpose, people will remember them long after you're gone. Not because you were perfect, but because you were meaningful. People don't remember actors in conversations. They remember the ones who spoke with reason, with truth, with heart. They remember the ones who weren't trying to win attention, but who were trying to deliver intention. Even in silence, purpose speaks louder than performance. And when you do speak, let your words be arrows, not balloons. Not empty, floating things that pop in the wind, but focused, sharp, clear arrows that land where they're meant to. Arrows that carry vision. Arrows that bring change. Arrows that cut through the noise. Because when you speak with purpose, you don't need to beg for respect. Respect follows purpose. Respect recognizes purpose. And respect stays where purpose leads. Pause before power. Most people rush to speak. They feel that if they don't say something fast, they'll lose the moment. They're afraid of silence, like it's a weakness. But the strongest voices in the world know the truth. The real power is not in how quickly you speak, but in how deeply you pause. Think about it. In music, it's not just the notes that move you, it's the silence between the notes. The pause gives the sound its soul. The same applies to your voice. When you pause, you give weight to your words. When you pause, people lean in. Because in that quiet moment, the room breathes. The listener wakes up. Your next words suddenly become important, not because of volume, but because of timing. Imagine someone walks into a room, pacing back and forth. throwing words like darts, never stopping, never breathing. You hear them, but you don't feel them. Now imagine someone walks in, stands still, locks eyes with the audience, takes a breath, and says slowly, "Let me tell you something that changed my life." You feel it instantly. You're drawn in, not by performance, not by show, but by presence. That pause wasn't emptiness. It was energy, it was power. I remember sitting in a courtroom once, watching a seasoned lawyer defend someone's life. The other side spoke rapidly, throwing out facts, statements, accusations, all in a blur. Then this man stood up. He didn't speak for a full 5 seconds. He looked at the jury, at the judge, at the people in the back. Just silence. Some in the room got uncomfortable. But then he said, "I want to make sure you're all here with me, because what I'm about to say matters." That silence spoke louder than anything else in that room. It wasn't hesitation. It was control. It was a signal. What's coming next is not to be missed. We live in a world that's addicted to noise. Notifications, headlines, opinions, debates. Everybody's talking, but no one's listening. And the one who pauses stands out. The one who breathes commands the air. In daily life, it's the same. Think about a parent yelling at a child. Words flying, emotions high. The child shuts down. Now picture another parent who pauses, looks the child in the eye and says, "I need you to understand why this matters to me." Silence. Stillness. Then the words. And the child listens. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because the pause invited understanding, not just obedience. You don't need to rush to prove you're confident. Rushing is often insecurity in disguise. People who are unsure talk fast, trying to cover the silence with sound. But the confident pause. They pause before answering a question. They pause before entering the room. They pause before delivering truth. Because they know something powerful. Silence is not empty. It's full of purpose when you know how to use it. I once watched a man propose to the woman he loved. The moment was tense. He dropped to one knee, opened the box, and then paused. The whole room held its breath. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her. And in that pause, every emotion flooded in. And then he said, "Before I ask you this, I need you to know, you're the reason I became a better man." People cried. Not because the words were complicated, but because the pause made them sacred. Even in business, this principle wins. I sat in a leadership meeting once where two people were pitching ideas. One was fast, sharp, loaded with slides and graphs. He finished in 10 minutes, barely breathing. The other walked up, looked around the room, took a sip of water, then said, "We've been doing it this way for 10 years, but what if we tried this?" Pause. The silence filled the space like thunder. People listened. Not because he was flashy, but because his silence said, "This is important." When he spoke, every sentence landed like stone on water. Ripples, impact, change. The pause before power is not weakness. It is strategy. It is discipline. It is knowing when to hold the moment, when to let silence carry your truth, when to let your presence speak before your voice does. Sometimes in arguments, the best thing you can do is pause, breathe, collect. The person who pauses holds the higher ground. They are not reactive, they are responsive. And response always beats reaction. Have you ever said something you regretted just because you didn't pause? Because you didn't wait that extra second to weigh your words? One pause can save a relationship. One pause can avoid a disaster. One pause can shift the entire direction of a conversation. The most powerful communicators aren't the fastest. They're the most intentional. They use pauses like punctuation. They allow the listener's mind to catch up. They give space for emotion to land. They let the weight of truth settle before they move on. You don't need to fill every second with words. The best leaders know when to stop speaking, even in the middle of a sentence, and let the room feel the moment. That silence says, "Listen carefully. This matters." And people do, because the pause gave the words power. If you want to make your words unforgettable, learn to pause before you deliver them. The silence before truth is the silence that gives truth its spine. Let your words come out like arrows from a bow, not flung in panic, but pulled back in silence, aimed with precision, and released with purpose. And when they land with the kind of force only a pause can create. Tone is the throne of your message. Not the words, not the grammar, not even the brilliance of your idea. It's the tone that tells the world who you are and why they should listen. Tone is not just how you say something. It's the spirit behind the sentence, the energy behind the words, the emotion riding on your voice. And people don't just hear your tone, they feel it. You can say the exact same words and change the entire meaning just by shifting your tone. Say, "I'm proud of you," with sincerity, and it lifts someone's soul. Say it with sarcasm, and it wounds deeper than silence. Say it with indifference, and it leaves the heart empty. That's the power of tone. It's not decoration, it's direction. It tells people whether they should open their heart or build their wall. I remember a teacher who once changed my entire path, not because she had the most credentials or the best lesson plans, but because of the way she spoke to me. I was failing, discouraged, on the edge of giving up. And she didn't yell. She didn't shame. She leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "You're not a failure. You're a fighter who hasn't found his fight yet." The tone wasn't loud, but it was strong, not dramatic, but deep. And in that moment, her tone gave me a throne to sit on, dignity, hope, and a reason to rise again. In everyday life, tone creates the climate of every conversation. When a leader walks into a room, people aren't just listening to what's said, they're absorbing the tone. Does this person respect me, inspire me, understand me, or just tolerate me? The leader may say, "I believe in you." But if the tone carries doubt, everyone feels it. And that tone will sabotage the message before it even lands. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You need to be intentional. Some people speak with a tone that uplifts like sunrise, soft, steady, and full of light. Others speak like a storm, heavy, erratic, destructive. And the difference isn't their message, it's their tone. Because tone reveals the truth behind your words. You can't fake it for long. It seeps through. You walk into a cafe and the barista says, "How can I help you?" Now, if the tone is warm, you feel welcomed. If the tone is cold, you feel like a burden. Same words, different thrones. Or imagine calling a customer service line after being on hold for 30 minutes. The agent picks up and says, "What seems to be the problem?" That tone could either calm your nerves or ignite your fire. It's not the phrase, it's the feeling behind it. Tone determines the altitude of your influence. I've seen brilliant minds lose their audience because their tone was condescending. I've seen simple messages move mountains because the tone was humble, passionate, and pure. A tone filled with ego pushes people away. A tone filled with authenticity draws them in. There's a father I once met who told me his teenage son had stopped speaking to him. No fights, no drama, just silence. So I asked him, "How do you talk to your son?" He said, "Give him advice. I tell him what's best for him." I asked again, "But how is your tone?" He paused, then said, "Honestly impatient, frustrated, tired." And there it was. Not the words, but the throne. The tone had told the son, "You're a problem, not a priority." And that's the message he heard, no matter what was said. Tone is the music behind your message. People may not remember your exact words, but they will remember how your tone made them feel. Did it build them or break them? Did it inspire or insult? Did it connect or control? You want to speak like a leader. Master your tone. When you correct someone, let your tone carry respect. When you praise someone, let your tone carry genuine joy. When you disagree, let your tone carry calm curiosity, not aggression. Because the moment your tone loses its honor, your words lose their influence. I've seen broken relationships restored not by perfect apologies, but by broken voices. Voices trembling with real remorse. I've seen teams rise, not because their leader shouted louder, but because their leader spoke with clarity and calm in the storm. And I've seen communities crumble under leaders who spoke the right words with the wrong tone. Angry, dismissive, self-righteous. A surgeon may have the right tools, but if their hand shakes, they can still cause damage. Your words are the tools, but your tone is the hand. Steady it, guide it. Because what you say means nothing if how you say it doesn't match. You don't have to be eloquent to be effective. But your tone must be aligned with your intention. Let your tone be a mirror of your mission, not your mood. You may feel tired, angry, impatient, but the listener doesn't know what you've been through. They only know what your tone tells them. And your tone should never punish someone for a war they didn't start. Even when you're silent, your tone speaks. It's in your body language, your facial expression, your pace, your presence. So take ownership of it. Refine it. Let your tone be a throne where people feel safe, seen, and strong enough to grow. Because when your tone becomes a throne, your message becomes a crown. And people won't just listen to you. They'll follow you, trust you, and rise with you. Listen louder than you speak. Let that sink in. In a world obsessed with making noise, the real leaders are the ones who master the art of listening. Not hearing, listening. There's a difference. Hearing is passive. Listening is power. Hearing fills your ears, but listening fills your mind and heart. The louder you listen, the more respect you command without ever having to raise your voice. Most people speak to reply, not to understand. They wait for their turn. They think about what to say next while the other person is still talking. But a true leader silences that inner noise. They don't listen to the words alone. They listen to the weight behind the words. They listen with their eyes, their body, their presence. And because of that, people trust them. People open up to them. People follow them. Not because they talk so much, but because they listen so well. I remember this young man who was failing in his job. Not because he lacked talent, not because he wasn't hardworking, but because he wouldn't stop talking. Every meeting, he would jump in, interrupt, finish other people's sentences. And the worst part, he thought that was leadership. He thought being the loudest meant being the smartest. One day, an old mentor pulled him aside and said, "You think they're not listening to you. But the truth is, they're waiting for you to shut up so they can breathe." That moment hit him like lightning. He realized something powerful. People don't respect your voice unless they believe you respect theirs. Think of the most powerful people in your life. The ones who made you feel seen. The ones who shifted your mindset. The ones who lifted your soul. They probably didn't do it by shouting. They did it by listening, deeply, intentionally, silently. They created space for your truth to rise. And when you felt heard, you felt valued. And when you felt valued, you followed them. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. A woman once told me her marriage was falling apart. She said, "We talk all the time, but we're still distant." I asked her, "When was the last time you truly listened to each other?" She paused, eyes watered, and then said, "We haven't. We've just been defending ourselves." See, when both people are speaking, no one's being served. Listening is the only bridge strong enough to carry two hearts over conflict. Not louder talking, louder listening. In business, the leader who listens is the one who wins the room. I've sat in board meetings where everyone tried to outshine each other with clever words, but the real power player, the one who leaned back, took notes, nodded, made eye contact, said nothing for half the meeting, and then delivered one sentence that changed the entire direction of the strategy. Why? Because they listened before they spoke. They gathered the temperature before they adjusted the thermostat. One time, I watched a boy fall on the sidewalk and start crying. Two people walked by and said, "You're okay? Stop crying." But one woman knelt down and said nothing at first. She just looked at him, waited, listened to the silence, and then said, "That scared you, didn't it?" The boy nodded through his tears. She didn't try to fix him. She listened louder than she spoke. And that alone calmed the storm in his little heart. When you listen louder than you speak, you build trust. And trust is the currency of leadership. People may not always agree with you, but if they feel heard by you, they will respect you. They will bring you their honesty, their loyalty, their creativity. And all it takes is the willingness to shut your mouth so you can open your mind. There's a dangerous myth that says leaders have to be the ones always talking, always presenting, always explaining. But the strongest leaders aren't the ones always making statements. They're the ones asking questions, curious questions, open-hearted questions. And then they wait. They don't rush the answer. They don't interrupt the silence. They let people speak their full truth. And when they finally respond, their words are magnetic, not because they spoke more, but because they listened longer. Every person you meet is carrying a story, and most of them are dying for someone to hear it. Not fix it, just hear it. You don't need to be the hero in every conversation. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is hold space, hold silence, hold presence. Listening louder than you speak doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become purposeful. Your silence has intention. Your attention has weight. Think about customer service. The companies that win customers for life are the ones that listen with empathy. Not the ones who have the perfect script, but the ones who say, "I understand how that must feel." Think about parenting. The kids who grow up with confidence are the ones whose parents actually listen to their feelings, not just discipline their behavior. Think about friends. The ones you call in a crisis are not the ones who give the best advice, but the ones who just sit with you, listen without judgment, and make you feel human again. It's not your voice that makes you a leader, it's your ears. Your ability to hear what's being said and what's not being said. Your ability to sense the fear behind the anger, the hope behind the silence, the pain behind the sarcasm. This is emotional intelligence in action. This is how leaders rise. Not by standing taller, but by listening deeper. So the next time you feel the urge to interrupt, the need to prove, the itch to dominate a conversation, pause, breathe, lean in. Ask yourself, am I listening to understand, or am I listening to respond? Because the difference will define the depth of your influence. Listen like their voice is the most important sound in the room. Listen like their story could change you. Because if you listen louder than you speak, you won't need to demand respect. It will be given to you freely. Because people give their hearts to those who first give them their ears. Master the art of storytelling, because facts inform, but stories transform. You can stand in front of a room and throw out statistics, data, achievements. But the moment you tell a story, something shifts. Eyes lift, hearts open, minds begin to imagine. Stories are not entertainment, they are connection. They are the thread that weaves one human experience into another across generations, cultures, and beliefs. When you speak, don't just deliver content, deliver a journey. Make people feel like they are walking beside you, not sitting in front of you. Imagine you're in a room full of strangers. Everyone's guarded, polite, quiet. Then someone stands up and begins to tell a story, not a polished speech, not a motivational slogan, but a raw, honest story. Maybe it's about failure. Maybe it's about love. Maybe it's about growing up without a father and learning to become one. The whole room changes. Walls come down. The story becomes a mirror, and everyone sees a piece of themselves inside it. That's the power of storytelling. It doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't preach, it reveals. I remember a man who got up to speak at a leadership event. On paper, he was nobody special. He had no title, no fame. But when he started telling the story of how he survived being homeless for 2 years while raising a daughter, The entire room leaned in. No slides, no microphone tricks. Just a voice, a memory, and a truth. By the time he finished, people were in tears. And they didn't clap because they were impressed. They clapped because they were moved. Because in that moment, his story became theirs. You don't need a perfect life to tell a powerful story. In fact, it's the imperfections that make it real. People don't connect with your success. They connect with your scars. They don't need to know how amazing you are. They need to know you've been where they are. When you tell your story, be honest. Don't edit the pain out. Don't rush to the happy ending. Let them walk through the fire with you. Let them feel the weight of your doubt, your fear, your breakthrough. Because when they feel it, they believe it. I met a teacher who told stories to her students every Friday. She called them soul seeds. They weren't fairy tales. They were stories from her life. The time she almost gave up on college. The moment she forgave her mother. The night she walked home with empty pockets and a full heart. Her students didn't just respect her. They loved her. Not because she had all the answers, but because her stories made them feel seen. Made them feel like their own stories mattered. In business, storytelling is the difference between a brand and a movement. People don't buy products, they buy feelings. They buy the story behind the product, the why, the struggle, the journey. Every great brand has a story that resonates with the heart. Not just a message, but a memory. If you want people to follow you, remember you believe you. Don't just show them the result. Tell them the road. Tell them how you got there. What you almost lost. What you learned. Let them walk in your shoes, if only for a moment. I once worked with a young speaker who had great ideas, but no one listened. He asked me what he was doing wrong. I told him, "You're talking like a manual, not a movie. People don't want bullet points. They want the heartbeat." So we worked on turning his key points into stories. Instead of saying, "Resilience is important," he told the story of the night his car broke down in the middle of winter, how he had to walk 5 miles in the snow, and how that night taught him more about grit than any book ever could. When he told that story, the room didn't just listen. They felt it. They lived it. And from that moment on, he was no longer just a speaker. He was a storyteller. Every day, life gives you stories. They don't always look like stories at first. Sometimes they look like mistakes. Sometimes they look like heartbreak. Sometimes they look like boring routines. But inside every moment, there's a message. And your job is to mine it. Turn it into a gift. You don't need to be dramatic. You don't need to be funny. You just need to be real. Speak from your soul, not your script. A woman once told me, "I don't have a story worth sharing." I looked at her and said, "Then you haven't looked close enough." And when we started talking, she told me how she raised 3 kids alone, worked night shifts to keep food on the table, and somehow still managed to read bedtime stories every night. I said, "That's not just a story, that's a masterpiece." So many people walk around with untold stories inside them, thinking they're ordinary. But what's ordinary to you can be extraordinary to someone else. Storytelling is not about impressing people. It's about impacting them. And the best stories aren't always loud, they're honest, vulnerable, human. When you master the art of storytelling, you don't need to force people to listen. They'll lean in because they feel something. Because your story speaks to their soul. And that kind of communication doesn't fade. It echoes. It lingers. It changes things. So the next time you speak, don't try to sound perfect. Try to sound human. Reach back into your life, pull out a moment that mattered, and offer it like a candle. Because someone out there is walking in the dark, and your story might be the light they've been waiting for. Speak from conviction, not convenience. Because when your words come from a place of convenience, they float. They pass by ears like empty breeze. But when they come from conviction, they land. They plant roots. They pierce. They echo. Conviction is the fire in your voice that cannot be faked. It's what turns a whisper into thunder, even in silence. People may forget your words, but they will never forget how your conviction made them feel. There's something magnetic about someone who speaks from the core of what they believe. Even if you don't agree with them, you respect them. Because you can feel it. They're not performing, they're not adjusting their message to fit the mood of the room. They're not saying what's easy or popular. They're saying what's true to them. And that truth carries weight. Real weight. Weight that can shift a room, lift a crowd, or break through hardened hearts. I once met a young man who worked in sales. He was sharp, polished, always smiling. But every pitch felt rehearsed. Every word felt like a line he memorized. He sold products, yes, but no one remembered him. One day, I asked him, "Do you even believe in what you're saying?" He looked at me and paused, then said, "Not really. I just say what works." I told him, "Then you'll never lead. You'll always chase." Because leadership starts when your message is no longer a performance, but a reflection of your core. When your speech is no longer about being accepted, but about being aligned. Conviction doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing yourself. It's not about being the loudest voice. It's about being the clearest one. People follow clarity. People follow strength of belief. You don't need to be aggressive, but you must be anchored. If your voice shakes, let it shake with truth. If your words are simple, let them be soaked in sincerity. Because people don't trust the polished, they trust the real. A mother who fights for her child's future doesn't speak from convenience. She speaks from fire. A leader who risks his position to stand up for what's right doesn't speak from convenience. He speaks from principle. Even a child, when they speak their truth with tears in their eyes, silences a room. Why? Because the human soul recognizes authenticity. It cuts through noise. It awakens something ancient in us. Something that says, this is real. This matters. I remember hearing a story about a janitor in a school who stood up during a staff meeting and calmly said, "I don't have degrees like many of you, but I see the kids when they cry in the hallways. And I think we're missing something." The room went quiet, not because he had power, but because he had conviction. Because he wasn't trying to sound smart. He was speaking from experience, from heart, from truth. And that moment led to a shift in how the school supported its students. Too many people trade their voice for approval. They edit their truth to fit trends. They smooth out their rough edges so they don't offend. But every time you do that, you weaken your voice. You dilute your presence. You betray the very thing that could set you apart. Don't speak to blend in. Speak to breakthrough, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable, think about the conversations that changed your life. They probably didn't come from someone trying to please you. They came from someone who dared to tell you something you needed to hear. Something bold. Something unfiltered. Something born from their own conviction. And in that moment, you didn't just hear a person, you heard a mirror. You saw your own life in a new light. That's the power of speaking from conviction. It doesn't just inform, it transforms. A girl once stood in front of her class and gave a speech on bullying. She wasn't the best speaker. Her hands trembled, her voice cracked. But every word came from the depths of her own pain, her own story, her own scars. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Not because she had the best grammar or vocabulary, but because she was real raw, unedited. Her pain became a platform. Her truth became her strength and her conviction. It moved mountains in the hearts of those who listened. Don't wait until your voice is perfect to use it. Speak now. Speak with what you have. Speak from where you've been. And when you speak, ask yourself, do I believe this? Does this come from me or from what others expect of me? Because when your voice aligns with your soul, it becomes unstoppable. Your conviction is your compass. It's what keeps you grounded when others doubt you. It's what helps you stand tall when the winds of criticism blow. It's what gives you peace when you walk alone. Because you know you didn't bend to fit in. You stood to stand out. And in a world full of echo chambers, your truth is your superpower. Remember this? There is someone out there waiting to hear a voice like yours. Not a voice that's convenient. Not a voice that's polished to perfection, but a voice that's convicted. A voice that's felt what they're feeling. A voice that's walked through fire and still chooses to speak. Be that voice. Let your truth speak louder than your fear. Let your conviction speak louder than your comfort. And every time you speak, speak like your words have purpose. Speak like someone's life depends on it. Because one day, you've heard the words, you've felt the fire. But now, the question is not what you've heard, it's what you will do with it. Because words alone don't change the world. Decisions do. It's not enough to sound like a leader. You must decide to become one. And the decision isn't made on a stage, it's made in silence. In the quiet moments when no one is watching, when it's easier to stay silent, but something inside you says speak. When it's safer to blend in, but your soul screams stand out. You don't need a crown to lead, you need courage. You don't need a title to be respected, you need truth. Leadership is not in volume, it's in vision. Respect is not earned through charm, it's earned through consistency. And if you want people to follow you, remember this, they will never follow your lips if they can't trust your life. People watch how you walk more than how you talk. Someone once said, your voice is the fingerprint of your soul, so use it. Don't water it down to fit into places that were never meant to hold your power. Don't shrink so others feel tall. You were not made to be silent. You were made to shake atmospheres. You were not born to echo what's safe. You were born to create a sound that awakens something in the people who hear you. They told you to stay in line. They told you to wait your turn. They told you to be realistic. But giants don't wait for permission to take steps. They don't wait for applause to speak. They don't wait for perfect conditions to rise. They rise anyway. They rise in the rain. They rise in the noise. They rise when it's hard. Because the voice of a real leader doesn't come from the outside. It comes from a fire within. The stage doesn't make you powerful. The suit doesn't make you respected. The followers don't make you wise. Your impact is not measured by the crowd you gather, but by the lives you change. The greatest leaders speak with purpose, live with principle, and stand when everyone else is sitting. They are not perfect, but they are present. Not flawless, but fearless. And in a world full of noise, their voice becomes a compass for others who are lost. So if you want to speak like a leader, then speak with intention. Let your words carry meaning, not just sound. Let your voice carry values, not just volume. Remember what Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it is done. Remember what Steve Jobs said, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And remember what myles Munroe said, leaders are not born, they are made through vision, discipline, and sacrifice. When you walk out of this room, don't just aim to be impressive, aim to be impactful. Don't chase attention, earn admiration. Don't talk to be heard, speak to be remembered. Because when you speak with clarity, when you move with integrity, and when you live with intention, you don't just get respect, you become the standard of what respect looks like. You don't need 1 million followers to lead. You just need the courage to be authentic, to speak even if your voice shakes, to walk even if the road is lonely, to rise even if no one claps. Because one voice, spoken with conviction, can light a fire in the hearts of thousands. And that voice could be yours, so lift your head, straighten your back, and speak like your words carry the weight of a generation. because maybe they do. Maybe the world doesn't need another influencer. It needs a leader. And maybe that leader has been waiting inside you all along, waiting for the day you stopped playing small and started speaking with fire. That day is today. And your voice, your truth, your story, it's time the world hears it.